Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Mark Fixes Stuff. Today we'll be looking at this mysterious package. And by mysterious I mean dodgy and suspicious, but it's not ticking and it's not turkey. Looking at the other side, I've no idea how to get inside this mystery bag. So I think the best thing to do is grab the trusty scissors and start chopping away. Of course I'm taking it easy because I don't want to damage the contents. One cut there, and maybe another cut here. But already I'm getting a good idea of what's inside the bag. Let's just make a nice flap on the top. Just a little more. I can go to one side. And yes, I think it's fairly obvious to anybody who's watching what this is. It's a jigsaw puzzle. It's a Sega Mega CD1, and to be honest, this one is looking Mega CD. It was devised and released by Sega to try and fend off rival companies' CD-based systems. This one looks like it's been stored in a barn. In fact, it's really rusty. If we turn to the top, we can see that there's a big dent. Looks like maybe one of those farmyard animals have sat on it. There is a ray of sunshine though, because someone's been really helpful and physically torn the save battery from the board. One less thing to do for me. As we move the metal shielding, we can see something else amiss. Let's take that all the way off. The fuse has been completely removed, although the Darlington transistor looks like it's probably okay, without the characteristic burn mark that you sometimes see when the unit's been mispowered. There is a nice little melty bit on the back of the barrel connector though. Anecdotal evidence from within the Sega user community suggests that these caps can cause the machine not to power on, so they'll all have to be replaced. Turning our attention back to the metal shielding, it's clearly quite rusty and has been stored in damp conditions. I've definitely seen worse though, so I'm sure we can bring it up to some sort of functional level. The shielding over the main board is kind of trapped by these ribbon cables. Working carefully to gently untangle the bent shielding, we can remove these ribbon cables with a minimal risk of damage. My goodness, someone's really mangled this part, but I do think we can do something with it. These flat folded cables are fairly easy to find even in the modern world as spare parts, which is great news because one of the contacts is actually lifted on this one. I'll show you later. Moving our attention to the main board, we can see some SMD capacitors that have leaked on the board. Near the processor and the ROM chip. In fact, every single one of these SMD capacitors is leaked. We'll also need to replace the save game battery that someone appears to have ripped off in a fit of unbridled rage. Delicious capacitor soup. Yummy. When we open the package, we all realise that the front bezel had been snapped. It's a bit warped and it's a bit scuffed up, but I think we can make it functional if not beautiful. Looking at the rest of the plastics, well, I think the best word to use here would be tired. We're going to give them a good soapy bath and then see what we can make of them with some plastics polish. Aside from wear and tear, the front of the machine doesn't look too bad. However, the machine does have a worrying rattle. That's never a good sign for retro, so we're going to take this all apart and see what's rattling around inside. Removing the shielding, we can see someone who we thought was long gone, Mr. Save Game Battery. How are you, Mr. Save Game Battery? They did what? With pliers? You've seen terrible things! Well, I'm not sure we can use you anymore, let's see. No, I think it's probably better to put you out to pasture and get a new part to do the job. Removing the board connector reveals it could do with a bit of a clean, but it also frees up the board completely. This board's had a hard time of it recently, so it's definitely ready for a retro resurrection. It's time to get down to work and see what we need to order so that we can repair this unit in part 2 of the series. The Mega CD1 comes with either a Sony or a JVC mechanism. I'm quite curious to see which one we have in here. I'm going to remove these two screws and take off the bracing at the top. And if you have a JVC mechanism, it's quite easily identified by the stamped JVC on the laser head. And look, another component comes out to play, the locking mechanism from the left hand side of the console. Well, that's quite handy. I think we've got everything we need now. Let's remove the CD mechanism from the case, and let's do it ninja style, quickly as possible. As you lift the CD mechanism out of the case, be careful of the cable because it goes through a choke which is stuck onto the shielding at the bottom. So just take it out nice and gently. Now we can see close up that that contact has delaminated away from the flat cable. I think we can save it with the careful use of some glue, which would be great news because we won't have to pay for a new part. The other end of the cable disappears into the CD-ROM itself. CD-ROMs are the one thing that I don't recommend routinely recapping. This is because if you change the capacitors, you change the mechanism tolerances, and then they need to be reset up with an oscilloscope and a special jig, which is far beyond the scope of this video. And finally, it's time to remove the subboard. This board does some important things. Primarily, it allows the power into the unit through this DC barrel plug connector. As we saw earlier, there's some big problems down in the power section. This Darlington device actually turns the power onto the console through this fuse when it detects the power on the Sega Megadrive on the top. But this one doesn't appear to be burnt. Sometimes they have a little brown mark on the top if they've been incorrectly powered. We'll check to see if we need to order a new one, and we'll also order a new fuse while we're at it. This subboard does quite a lot of the audio work and also has a lot of capacitors that are known for drying out. Let's remove it from the machine. Removing the last screw of the two that should be securing this board is a reminder that we'll need to find some screws as well. And lifting the subboard out, it becomes instantly plain that this is not the most expensive piece of electronics you're ever going to handle. Let's check that Darlington, darlings! Thankfully for us, checking a Darlington transistor is fairly easy. You'll need diode check mode on your meter. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the negative lead of the meter and put it on the base. The base and pin 2 of this device are common, meaning we show little to no resistance. Now if we move to pin 1, we should see an open circuit. No current should flow. And there's nothing getting through there because of the reverse bias of the meter. Now we're moving to pin 3. Again, we shouldn't see anything flowing. That's great news, so that means the junctions are intact, at least that way. Whoops, slipped back onto pin 2 with the probe there, so you can ignore that. Now with the positive lead on base, we'll just check again that pin 2 has no resistance. And now we'll move on to pin 1 and we should see a low HFE. That is to say transistor current gain, meaning that electrons can flow across these junctions. And they both look really healthy, so this device is okay. That's great news. We don't need to buy another one. We can now turn the meter off and move that out of the way. Now what else do we need to buy? We need to buy one of these 2.5 amp fuses, and also we need to replace all of these electrolytic capacitors on this board. As we said earlier, we'll need to replace quite a lot of through-hole and SMD capacitors in the whole machine, and don't forget these have leaked. We'll also need to replace this save game battery and generally give it a lot of tender loving care. I know it looks bad, it is bad, but I think this is one piece of retro that can wise from its grave. See you all in the next exciting episode of Mark Fix's Stuff Retro Resurrection. Like, share and subscribe. Oh, and also maybe you'd like to watch some of these videos. Here, I'll stick them on the screen for you.